My overall thoughts, listen, it's intriguing. It definitely is. This is a guy that I think at the beginning of the process there was skepticism as to whether or not he would be a serious candidate, but certainly he's someone who has some major backers within the organization who know him very, very well. Obviously, the people that have been in the Mets organization forever know him really well, but a guy like Allard Baird, who is a big, big part of this front office and a big sounding board for Brodie Van Wagenen. He was Beltran's general manager when he was at the beginning of his career in Kansas City. Certainly Omar Minaya was the one who signed him to the big contract. So he has a lot of people that know him well that were pushing for this, I would presume. And when it comes to Beltran, listen, I heard Todd say it. I know Andy said it as well. But there's certainly something to be said for someone who made over $220 million over the course of a 2-decade career this badly wanting something like this. It is different than many players, many superstar players that we see in the game nowadays who don't feel the need to get back into it, who don't really have the passion to continue the daily grind. And so it's different than when you see certain guys kind of stick their toe back in the water but maybe aren't all in on it. Carlos Beltran wanted this. He went into the Yankees front office last year to learn this even more so. And I think that if he brings the passion that he clearly brought to his playing career and that there's no indication he won't bring to this job based on how badly he wanted it, then it has the chance to be a very successful partnership.
No, you're so right, Stephen. I know we keep hammering this point home that star players like this don't usually take this job. And Mickey Callaway is an example. That was a guy who was struggling to make his place in Major League Baseball as a fifth starter and as a long reliever. And he's the type of manager that gets hired these days, or a backup catcher. You see a lot of those. But a guy of his level, you don't often see. So you know this dynamic. You're in that clubhouse every day. The superstar level players in Major League Baseball, the active ones, how do you see them responding to a former superstar player being their manager?
I think that they will respond to him better than they would probably respond to any other manager, at least at the outset, to be quite honest with you, especially someone like Carlos Beltran, who retired 2 years ago. I've talked to former players current players, I should say, over the last couple of days, and Carlos Beltran immediately has their respect. I can promise you that. He's a guy that has been universally respected in this game for a long time amongst his peers. Players that didn't even play with him were telling me, one guy was telling me that recently when Carlos Beltran was playing on an opposing team, he would come over sometimes and talk to players on the opposition after the series was over, telling them certain things that he liked about their game that they were trying to pick up. And so he's a mentor to a lot of people throughout the game. He has universal respect for the way that he played the game. And right off the bat, he will have a cachet with that clubhouse, especially when you talk about some of these veteran players, a Robinson Cano, that maybe a guy that didn't have that level of success in the major leagues would have to earn through a significantly longer process as the season goes on. That's not to say that lasts and that's carte blanche throughout the year or the years, but I think that Carlos Beltran and a superstar player like that has a cachet right off the bat that many managers do not have.
Yeah, to your point, Steve, Marcus Stroman 26 minutes ago on Twitter tweeted "Let's go" in all caps and tagged Carlos Beltran in that. What would you say, Steve, though, to the Met fan out there that is skeptical, just watched 2 years of Mickey Callaway really struggle with the in-game decisions, skeptical that Carlos Beltran can step in without having been a big league manager and get the in-game decisions right?
I think that Mets fans have a right to be skeptical, certainly. When you look at the candidates, the known candidates in this pool, when you looked at a guy like Joe Girardi, the one thing that you could say about him is that you knew what the floor was probably, and that floor was still pretty good. You don't know what the floor is with a first-time manager in Carlos Beltran, a first-time manager in Eduardo Perez, any of these other candidates, but I do think that there is something that probably should be avoided when you're talking from a Mets fan's perspective about putting too much stock into Mickey Callaway failing in a first-time managerial role. I think that's more an indictment, quite frankly, of the manager Mickey Callaway was than first-time managers across the board. I mean, we see Alex Cora a couple of years ago win a World Series. So I think that you can absolutely be successful as a first-time manager. The Mets are going to have to surround Beltran with the right people. There's going to need to be a strong bench coach that has some experience. There's going to need to be a good coaching staff to support Beltran, but there is no reason to think that he can't be successful. Is it a wild card? Is it a certainty? Of course it is. Whenever you go something for the first time, you don't know how it's going to play out. But Beltran certainly has a lot of check marks in his column that would make one believe he can be very successful in this role.